listening to Bible School Radio 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, would universal basic income programs create more of the same problems? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, universal basic income is aimed at the problems of poverty. However, do they do more harm than good? Crown CEO and author Chuck Bentley is my special guest today. Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, Bob, and I hope you're doing well today.
I'm doing real good and looking forward to our conversation on this. You know, universal basic income is a trend you wrote about in 7 Gray Swans, warning that we need to keep an eye on this one. First, let's start off with, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, definition of what universal basic income really is.
You know, Bob, it means that people receive a monthly income with no preconditions or no qualifications, and on an unlimited basis. That's what the term means. That you don't even have to qualify, you just get money in the mailbox.
Well, in a recent article in the Christian Post, you were asked about this trend, and you mentioned that there are already states in the U.S. that practice universal basic income. Who are a few of these states? I wasn't even aware of that this was actually going on, and has that impacted those particular cities?
Yes, it has. You know, when I wrote about it, Bob, I didn't think it was even plausible that this idea would take hold. But here we are 4 years later since I wrote the book, and now you're seeing these programs adopted on a limited basis, but a trial basis in Minnesota, California, Michigan, Massachusetts, Illinois, and also in Texas. Even in Harris County right now, there's a proposal to spend up to, I think, $20 million testing this for 18 months for residents in Harris County, Texas.
Well, I would imagine that state by state, the eligibility requirements are different to some degree. You know, what are some of the requirements that you've come across for people to qualify for this program?
Well, don't forget the general idea is that there are no qualifying constraints, because what people are saying is it's embarrassing to have to apply. So some states are just initiating the program so that you don't have to go looking for it. In Minnesota, where they're looking at giving $9,000 to people over an 18-month period, $9,000 per person in the household, that means a family of 4 could potentially receive, $36,000 of income. They do have to be below the poverty line in terms of their earned income at this point. Which, by the way, I don't know why we call it universal basic income. It's really universal basic charity, because income implies you've worked for it.
Sure.
But this really is a form of charity. It's a government subsistence program.
Now, last presidential election, we heard quite a bit about that. I doubt we'll hear that much about it now with just 2 candidates running, and that's it. But, let's talk a little bit about, these benefits from the standpoint of taxation. Are they taxed by any form of government?
Not that I'm aware of, Bob. The only people that are taxed to make these possible are the taxpayers.
Right.
And I'd like to ask you, Bob, pick a stranger that you would like to send $1,000 a month to on an unlimited basis. Any strangers out there that you would feel good about doing that for? Because the truth is, the government's going to pick them for you.
Yeah, it like a lot of things doesn't make sense. What are a few of the long-term consequences of programs like this?
when you read the studies that are being done, and there's some universities studying this, there's a Stanford lab that's following the trends, and all of them are touting the benefits. Most of them say that the money is spent on basic living expenses and that it actually bridges people to employment. But there's no expectations that you have to get a job. But what they're saying is it is working, meaning that it's a temporary fix that bridges people to needed income. What I'm concerned about long term is that you're saying to a person you're not needed in the workforce, which is a really bad message. Most welfare programs tend to drive employment down in an area, not up. So I think that's the long-term trend, is for people to drop out of the workforce, which we certainly don't need right now. And I think, secondly, it's going to drive up cost. It's inflationary, and it increases taxes on those who already are paying a significant portion in taxes.
Well, Economics 101 would tell you that this just doesn't work. In fact, Economics 101 will tell you socialism has not worked for anyone. To support these programs, the government will have to print money, of course, and you talked a little bit about this in your book as well. How can that make sense, or has common sense just come and gone? I mean, numbers were black and white, and they scream, this does not work. And obviously, you can look at it and use your common sense to see that it couldn't work. Couldn't work long term.
When I was in school, Bob, the only time we talked about numbers in terms of trillions was when we talked about stars of the universe. And I'm not kidding. It was something that was astronomical in the literal sense. And now we're talking about trillions of dollars of debt. And it is as if nobody is paying attention to the massive runaway debt bomb that I think is being created. And I truly do hope that the pain starts to show up somewhere where we tap the brakes. Because these programs that people are talking about, they feel good on one side, but where's the money going to come from? It's got to be either taxes or printing, and printing just creates more inflation. So I don't see it as a viable solution long-term on any basis.
You know what was interesting? I saw this statistic yesterday that as far as savings accounts go, during COVID, they went up, I think, like up to 32% or something like that. Today, those COVID-built savings accounts are at a negative place right now. All that money's gone. And it's just
go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead.
Well, it makes sense. When the government was sending people money, it was not uncommon for people to go, oh, I wasn't expecting that, and they put it away, at least for a period of time. But because it was inflationary, suddenly that money had to be drawn down. And there are people that are struggling to live month to month right now. I've read several articles that people are making in excess of six figures incomes, household incomes, and they're saying they cannot make ends meet. If you're carrying any form of high expense consumer debt, that's going to be a real problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm reading the same things, and people are struggling. Yet, all you hear about is that great, strong economy we've got, and everything's great. But, it looks like, Chuck, people are dipping into their 401k plans and taking some extreme measures just to keep up with this inflation, which just is stagnant and doesn't seem to want to go away.
Well, one of the things that I like to do is to ask myself, are we going to follow the Japanese model? And the Japanese model is they have like 230% debt to GDP, and yet they keep right on going. They haven't collapsed. Their currency didn't collapse. Now, they had a massive devaluation, and they had a massive market correction. But the reason that they motored on and their economy continued to grow is they had a high personal savings rate. And in America, we don't have that. We have a low personal savings rate. On our best years, we hover around 4 or 5% of what people are able to set aside and save. Now, some people argue whether that includes their retirement accounts that are managed by their corporate, by their employers. So it depends on which number you look at. And we do have retained earnings and high cash reserves in some of our larger corporations. But the question is, are we going to live just like the government with high personal debt and low personal savings? And that means we can't follow the Japanese model, or the economy will begin to shrink.
Just as a side note, Chuck, I was we talked about this, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, how interest rates on credit cards are 25, 27%. Lately, fast forward to today, I don't know if you've been seeing this, but I'm seeing minimum of 30%, 35, 37%. And this has got to have an end game to it.
Yeah, I would consider that predatory.
Yes, I
would too. You're definitely in the predatory category, and I would just shudder that anyone would sign up for that. I just read an article the other day, Bob, of somebody who posted like a TikTok video that they had made $1,400 car payments for 3 years, and when they sold the car, they still owed $70,000 on the payoff.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I think they had a 14% automobile note, a loan on their new car.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you want more information on Chuck and a phenomenal ministry, crown.org, go check it out. Now, Chuck, what do you say to the Christian who has got a heart for those struggling with poverty and thinks that the idea, if you look on the surface, has great merit to it?
Well, I hope I don't sound like I don't have a heart for the poor, Bob. I know that I can sound hard on these programs, but the reason I'm hard on them is they don't work. And what I'm a big fan of are things that do work. You're practical. You help people manage their finances. I do the same thing, and we know that it starts with work. God designed us to work. The 5 functions of God's economy are to work, give, save, spend, and invest. And we should be doing all 5 of those things, not hoping that the government takes care of us. And so I like to help people see that if they begin to work and learn to give, no matter who you are or what income level you are, giving is actually a blessing for the giver. Giving, people who give live longer. They're happier. They're better adjusted. They have a better outlook on life. So we work, give, we save to demonstrate we're not foolish. We're not living on the financial edge all the time. We learn to spend less than we make so that we have a surplus that we can invest, multiply resources so that virtuous cycle continues to spin. Jobs are created, more people go to work. And so that's how God designed us to function. And I would say if you want to help the poor do what we've learned that works really well, is to teach them those 5 attributes of living in God's economy, because that's how he provides for you, Bob. It's how he provides for me. It's how he wants to provide for all people. That's his model.
Well, the Foundation for Government Accountability offers several reasons why this is a bad idea. They stated that this was interesting, when the administration increased food stamp benefits, grocery prices rose by at least 15%. I don't think people realize that. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, anytime you put money into the system, it is inflationary. I mean, there's more money in the system than there are available goods, so that means prices are going to go up. And we don't realize that that's a form of taxation. Basically, the government may not send me a bill for my pro rata share of that handout, of that welfare program, but I'm paying for it at the grocery store. I'm paying for it on the cost of other things that I need to buy. That's what's happening to us right now. This inflation is all been caused by the handouts in COVID. And I have to say, Bob, I got one of them. The government sent me money, and I couldn't believe it. I looked at that check and I thought, I can't. What am I going to do with this? What we ended up doing was we gave. We gave it away. We invested it in God's kingdom, but that's why we're experiencing such inflation right now.
Well, you could have taken that $1,000, put it in the bank, and went to a Chick-fil-A to eat dinner, and you might have been able to pay for it.
Well, I wouldn't pick on Chick-fil-A. I would just say just about any of the fast food restaurants out there are, they're all charging $20 for hamburgers.
So, there's many ministries out there aimed at helping the poor and giving people a hand up instead of a hand out. How would someone find out about these ministries?
Well, I think you have to, in charitable circles, it's to ask, what is their theory of change? In our case, we used to look at poverty as a resource problem. And if you look at it as a resource problem, you ask people, what are you lacking that I can provide for you? That's like 90% of the paradigm in most of the way people think about poverty and charitable solutions. But in 2 Kings chapter 4, the man of God asked the poor widow who was desperate, what do you have? And so we flip that paradigm and we ask, instead of seeing it as a resource problem, we see poverty as a stewardship problem. And we start with the question, what do you have that we could help you to steward faithfully and to learn to work, give, save, spend, and invest so that God can multiply whatever you have, and he'll build on that faithfulness, and you will work with dignity, with your own hands, with your own resources, to find a way out of that dilemma that you're in now. I would just find out their theory of change and get behind those, because those are the systems that will work. Those are what's desperately needed in the way that we help people who are suffering in poverty.
I want to switch gears to another disturbing trend, which you write about in the book, a trend that you call fragile networks. This is really interesting, or at least I think it is, that I was just thinking back over the last, Chuck, the last 3 or 4 months. AT&T cyber attack, 77 million files were compromised. Change Healthcare, they're estimating that it affects over a third of America. Kaiser Permanente, 13 million at least, estimated to be affected. Ascension Healthcare, 140 hospitals, largest Catholic hospital network, have no idea how many people this is going to affect. There's 327 million people in the U.S. If you knew the true numbers, this could add up pretty quickly to 2/3 of America, pretty quick. It seems like that they're more. There's a bigger number of them, and they're much, much bigger, and they're happening just kind of one after another. What's your thoughts as you watch this? Because there's definitely something that's switched.
Yeah, I think so. I think what has switched is the power of supercomputers to run through all these random combination passwords and to hack into systems. They can run through billions of passwords instantly. And so I think the safe posture, Bob, is to assume that you've already been compromised.
Yes.
That, somebody's got your information. And that requires a response. And the response that I think is, first of all, proper password management, meaning it's probably a great idea to change passwords frequently, more often than you have in the past. Certainly you want a diversification of passwords, nothing that if they get one, they've got them all. And then I think third, layer up on security, whether it's two-factor authentication, anything you can do to prevent people from having easy access into your data, because it's happening and it's going to be really hard to prevent.
What's interesting, they say that Change Healthcare, none of this would have happened if they would have had two-factor authentication. So I hope I'm saying that right. And that seems like basic stuff, right?
Well, for some may not even know what that means. It means that you have a password, but then you've offered your mobile phone or another email address where they will send you an access code instantly on your phone or via email. And I think that's a great idea. It layers up the barriers to access those networks. And networks are fragile. We rely on them to function every day of our lives, but we shouldn't rely on them. I used to use the term Rolodex. Bob, did you use?
Yes, I did.
I used to have a Rolodex.
I hate to admit to it, but yes, I did.
Our kids don't even know what it means to write it down.
Right.
It's just not even in the vocabulary anymore.
Yeah, I was taking my son to the grocery store, and I said, hey, jot these things down on a piece of paper. And he goes, paper?
What?
Why? Why would I write this down on paper? But let me ask you a question, though, real quick, because we're running out of time. Is it that corporations are not spending the money necessary to keep the bad guys out, or the bad guys are getting smarter? Which one is it, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both, but most organizations are hiring cybersecurity experts. I have a friend that's gone into that field. He's getting a master's degree. I know people who are really, really good at that. But on the other side of the equation, the bad guys are getting good too. They're ramping up. And it is a real threat. It's a threat to our national security. It's a threat to our banking system. It's a threat to our privacy. And where I think it leads is sort of ultimately it's going to lead to what the Bible would call sort of this universal access model or system where everybody's got to have some sort of mark in order to get online and prove who you are. And I think we need to be really, really careful when things start to move towards universal IDs.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I think it was maybe 2017 or 2018. Tell me if you remember this. Home Depot was broken into, cyber attack. I think 66 million people were affected. That was front page news. Now, if any of this happens, in fact, I got a letter in the mail today telling me about the AT&T cyber attack, and I still think the majority of people don't really even know that has happened. It's just like people don't worry about it anymore. But you really got to be careful with what you're doing with your personal data.
No doubt about it. And I put a freeze on our credit accounts
right.
that. I didn't have to pay for that service. That's basically what these ID theft protection services you're paying them to do for you. But you can put a freeze on your account. So if your information is breached, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to create debt in your name and to steal your information.
Chuck, always great to talk with you. Once again, crown.org, phenomenal ministry you can go check out that Chuck runs. And the book we keep referring to is 7 Gray Swans, Trends That Threaten Our Financial Future. That can be found at the website as well. So, Chuck, great to talk to you. We'll look forward to talking to you next month.
Thank you, Bob. Keep up the good work with Prudent Money.
Thank you. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I tell you, I meant to mention that earlier when we could have a few minutes longer to talk about it. But, yeah, I got this letter in the mail today, and it's from AT&T warning me that I should do something. And I was thinking to myself, didn't this happen 2 or 3 months ago? And, of course, it matters. You want to make sure that you're protected at all times. It's never too late to get protected. Say it that way. But how these companies get away with just waiting to, and I don't know what they're waiting. I think they were waiting to maybe prove it wasn't that big of a deal, or I don't know. Who knows? But it's very interesting dilemma that I think we're finding ourselves in, and definitely need some action from each of us on our own to make sure that we are fully protected. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.